Hey up everyone, welcome to episode 5 and we're recording this on the 22nd of April 2021 for release the following day, and we're going to be talking to Mark Freeth today, and he is the owner of the Wargames Holiday Centre. So great interview with Mark, really good, really funny interview, so looking forward to that. Just before we go there, just a few bits of housekeeping to talk about. And the book from the episode 3 with Dr. Chris Brown has been claimed by Duncan in Canada, of all places. So I've mortgaged my house and I've sent that book across to him in Canada. Episode 4 is out today on YouTube, the episode where I speak to Colin Ashton about his exploits with his big games during lockdown. And great episode, that one, and I've coloured the background of that episode with lots of pictures of his lovely collections of figures. So if you've not heard that one, or you want to listen to it again with the added pleasure of looking at Colin's collection of figures, it's out on YouTube as we speak. Just search for Yarkshire Gamer with an A, and you'll find me. There isn't another one, without a shadow of a doubt. So that just goes on to this episode. I am really happy with how this one has come out. The sound quality of the stuff that I'm doing is getting better. I've never done a podcast before up until 2 months ago, and the progression from the pilot episode to this one I'm really happy with. So that's enough of me rambling on, and let's go to our interview with Mark. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back with episode 5 of the Yorkshire Gamers Reet Big Wargames podcast. And when I started the podcast, I set out to talk to people who knew about big games. And when I drew up that list of the first 5 people I wanted on my shows, this chap, Mark Freeth, was on the top of that list. If you don't know Mark, he is the current owner, or custodian. We'll discuss that as we get towards when we talk about the Wargames Holiday Centre later on. But he owns that and runs that, and big games there. Everyone can come and play a big game at the Wargames Holiday Centre. It's available for everyone. So very sadly, the Wargames Holiday Centre is no longer situated in God's own county. It's been transferred somewhere south of Sheffield. My geography gets a bit blurry once we get south of Sheffield. Let's welcome Mark Freeth to Yorkshire Gamers Big Wargames podcast. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Ken. Thank you very much for the invitation and the quite interesting introduction there. Thank you very much.
Well, we had a little chat before.
Wait a minute. How come I'm last on the list? Because you said top 5, and I am number 5. That intimates that I'm last.
No, what that says is that I've done them in. It's like the top 10 on top of the pops, Mark. It's done in reverse order, mate. It's done in reverse order. You see what I've done there?
Good recovery. I love it.
So we had a little chat before we started recording, and we're both fans of pretty dreadful football teams. Myself, Bradford City, and Mark, you're a Brentford fan, I believe.
I am, sir. I am.
And you've done a podcast before with Henry Hyde, is that right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm very good friends. Well, I like to think I'm good friends with Henry. Got a soft spot for the fella. He works with me in a number of ways.
Yeah.
He's been an advisory on marketing and that kind of aspect for the centre.
Yeah.
He also comes along to the Don Featherstone tribute weekend, and he runs the auction for me. So.
Oh, brilliant! Well, when you see Henry, because I've done a bit of revision and sort of looking into things before I speak to someone, and I had a listen to your podcast with Henry, and Henry described the previous location of the Wargames Holiday Centre as the bleak Yorkshire moors. So if you could have a word with Henry and just say that the Yorkshire Moors are a national park and an area of outstanding natural beauty.
A treasure, one might say.
A treasure for the country.
Indeed.
So I
You know, Ken, I still go there because but my partner Margaret, who's Mike's wife, Mike was the original owner.
Mike
she still lives there. Yeah, she still lives there. Yeah. Brilliant. So I go up there. Well, not in the last year, but I go back up there to Folkestone, which is just outside Scarborough.
Oh, I know the area well. I've worked and lived in Yorkshire for forever, so it's well familiar with me. I'm just setting up, Mark, because one of the first things that I do on the podcast is, as everyone else does, is that we do a little introduction of how you got into wargaming, but just to do it a little bit different. Like most things on Yorkshire Gamer are just that little bit different. I do this in 4 minutes.
Okay.
And this is because I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and our friend Henry, he'd like come on and they say, do us an introduction of how you got into wargaming, Henry. And he'd do an hour and 40. and then the poor lad who was running the podcast would go, thanks very much, Henry. And tonight's big I've run out of time.
So, but none of them were bored. None of them were bored, Ken.
So you've not had a practice. Some people have had a practice. Would you believe? One of the lads the lad on the first podcast, Chris, bless him, he works in the media, and he was absolutely spot on. So I'm not putting any pressure on you at all. But
no pressure.
People have done it properly in the past, is what I'm saying. So go on then, Mark. Just in 4 minutes, just try and summarise your introduction into wargaming and bring yourself up to date.
Okay. So, I mean, I think like a lot of gamers, probably some parental influence. My dad was very much into history, military history. And when I was born in the 60s, so, you know, the thing that was available to anybody that had any interest in that would be Airfix 1/72 or 1/32 figures. And he'd buy those for me, and he'd tell me some amazing stories about the history of them, of the units and the figures that I was getting. And not all of it true, you know, a lot of it was embellished and made up, but, you know, great. It conjured images in my mind. And I really fell in love with the whole look of it and all those stories. So going from the Airfix ranges, through the years, I continued buying additional. There was a range called Action Packs, if anybody remembers those. They were a 1/32 scale model range, and they did loads of Napoleonic stuff that you couldn't get with Airfix, etc. And that led me down a path of building quite a large force of 1/32, lots of painting of all that stuff. And then we moved back up to Basingstoke, to the area in Hampshire. And my dad discovered a Wargames club in Basingstoke, in the notice board of the local library. So I went along, you know, 12 years old, with the biggest sports bag I could get, with all these 1/32 figures in there. And these guys in the Basingstoke club, to this day, I'm still in touch with Phil Mercer, who's a good friend of mine, and Tony Connor, who are members of that club. And they remember me bringing in all my collection of these 1/32 figures and putting them beside their 28mm figures. I'd never heard of a metal figure. Yeah. I didn't know what that was. You know, Hinchcliffe was a complete revelation to me. And so I went in there, got really embarrassed because I got them all out. And while they were praising me, you know, I had the mounts even at that age to understand when I was being flannelled. So I just thought to myself, no, okay, I need to stop doing this with the plastic stuff. And I started buying Hinchcliffe models from a model shop in Reading. My dad then got very interested in it. We started using our own sets of rules. Minifigs, which is just down the road in Southampton. We used to buy a lot of stuff from there. We managed to buy a collection off a bus driver in Basingstoke. So, you know, the whole collection grows exponentially as a result. About 5 or 6 years later after that, a member of the club said to me, there's this place in Scarborough. I think it was in Thornton Liddell, which is just outside, about 15, 16 miles from Scarborough. And this guy, Peter Gilder's running it. And I thought, oh my God, Peter Gilder. Wow, yeah, you know, let's do that. And we took a weekend up to the Wargames Holiday Centre, as it was, you know, just outside. It had moved from Thornton Liddell by the time we got the money together to go up there. But when we got up there, just walking through the door, there was a smell about the place, and the whole view of this battlefield of Borodino was like something I'd only seen it in Wargames Illustrated. So seeing it laid before me, and this is like, I think this was early 1986. And Peter, what a character. You know, he was an entertainer. He had a real eye for the tabletop and how it should look. It just looked realistic. I can see you watching the clock, Ken. It's very off-putting.
Oh, listen.
Do. I can hear it. So, Wargames Holiday Centre, Peter Gilder. Peter introduced me to the guy who was buying it, Mike Ingham. And from Mike's relationship, that's where it blossomed. I spent 20 years really good friends with Mike. Sadly, he passed away. He wanted to keep it going. Interest for his wife, etc. And here we are. Moved it south. Get it.
No worries. A bit of pressure at the end there, Mark. I could feel. I could feel the pressure on there. That music comes in and people just panic.
I need to go to the toilet, Ken. Can you put it on pause?
Oh, of course we can. So it just mixes it up a little bit having that 4-minute section.
Yeah.
So we'll talk quite a lot about the Wargames Holiday Centre later on. But in your personal story there, you kind of mentioned Basingstoke Club and being around Reading. Are you still in a club? Do you still do that, or is the Wargames Holiday Centre enough?
No, the Wargames Holiday Centre does take up an awful lot of the time outside of my family life, as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm of an age now where I've got grandkids, and the kids have all moved out, so it's just me and the wife. But so there is time available. But I spend a fair bit of time pre-COVID. I would spend a lot of time researching the battles, developments, because there's always news coming up around the battle. So they'll discover some new information, which lends something to the battle, which we can then convert into the game, etc. So running the Wargames Holiday Centre, while it sounds great in that respect, but it does take up quite a bit of the time. It takes me about 2.5 hours to put all the boards out for the game. It'll take me a good 3-4 hours to get all the paperwork sorted out before the game. So, that's your evenings done. That's 2 evenings in the week before the actual weekend.
Is it just yourself doing all that, or have you got people who come down and help you? Just you?
Most of the time, it's just me. I did develop some forms of partnerships with the likes of Simon Miller, who runs To the Strongest, Big Red Bat Shop Enterprises. So we did some weekends with Simon. And his collection's absolutely fantastic. Absolutely out of this world.
He's on my after the first 5 list, so he's definitely not as important as you.
Oh no! I'll tell you what. If you get to see Simon's collection and get a good look at his rules, he should be number 5, definitely.
You reckon?
Definitely. Not me. But so the other guy is Dave Doherty. He works with me, and I've got a chap that helps me quite a lot, Paul Goodwin.
I know Dave.
Guys who are very, very helpful.
Brilliant. And outside of the Wargames Holiday Centre, do you do any gaming yourself? Do you have any time to sit down and?
I do, because I did have I've got a group of friends who, oddly enough, are not at all interested in going to the Wargames Holiday Centre.
Right. Okay.
And that's because. Their interest lies in science fiction or fantasy and that kind of thing. So before I took on the Wargames Holiday Centre, I'd do a lot of Warhammer type stuff, but still do a lot of historical stuff. So my feet were planted firmly in both camps. So I would run weekends doing Warhammer 40k tournaments, for instance. Before the Wargames Holiday Centre. And then even when I ran the early days of the Wargames Holiday Centre, we ran Warhammer Fantasy Battle and Warhammer 40k tournaments at the Wargames Holiday Centre. And I still do one a year where I get, a lot of the fantasy guys get together. And some of the painting is just amazing. So I stick with those guys. So outside of that, yes, I do play a bit of that, and we do things like we'll do Skirmish World War II, that kind of thing.
We've do you build your own collections of figures, or do you rely on the stuff that you've got at the holiday centre?
I do build my own collection. Well, I mean, there's a reliance because there's a huge. I mean, we've got 40,000 plus figures.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, but it doesn't stop me looking. And I mean, I can tell you now, I've just bought a hell of a lot of plastic cavalry, which I'm busy putting together. A good friend of mine paints them for me.
Yeah.
And so they're all going into the collection. So I'm very, very keen to see all the Russians and Prussians that are coming down the road.
Well, you might not know this, but somewhere in your Napoleonic collection there'll be some of my figures, because I did a bit of painting for Mike and Jerry a long time ago.
Oh, great!
So it'd be interesting to know if they're still there.
You'll have to come down, Ken, and pick them out.
Yeah, and spend all day looking through the trays to try and find them.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I like to talk to people about on here, and I'm hoping you remember Venn diagrams from school. Do you remember them?
Yeah.
Yeah. And each wargamer has their own personality and their own way that they like to play games and take part in the hobby, because it's quite a wide-ranging hobby with lots of different skills involved. You've got the modeling, you've got the terrain making, painting, the games itself, and I've broken it down into wargamer, painter, collector, and historian. And I think most of us, personally, I'm more of a painter than a gamer. So I'm sort of painter historian, I will put myself, and collector as well. How would you see yourself in those categories, Mark?
I'm definitely not a painter.
Right.
I'm so critical. I am so critical of my own work, Ken. And it takes me an age to do anything, because I keep having to go back over it. But certainly the history aspect of it interests me immensely. I like building terrain because I'm better at that than I am painting. I like painting horses, oddly enough.
Wow.
I spend all day painting horses, and I know a lot of gamers out there just don't like doing that. So it's quite odd. So I love all that. So the history, wargaming, I've got one mode really, and that's attack.
So you know, if you've got a position to hold, you're not the man.
No, I'm the man across the other side of the table. You're supposed to be over here.
Yeah. So if there's a table set up and there's a division of heavy cavalry in the corner, you push everyone out of the way like that.
No, it doesn't matter what you give me, Ken. I'm not right about it.
a bit of Arab militia with bows and no armor, and you're still charging forward. No, I like that. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I think most wargamers have sort of a type of game that they like to play, and the people, I'm sure you'll have met hundreds and hundreds of gamers. You'll have the guys who immediately gravitate to the cavalry section, charge everything forward in the first couple of moves, while the commander-in-chief just looks on completely bemused at what's going on. And then you'll
certainly have a wide variety.
And the guy who likes to hide behind a wall and wait for people to come to him. And
yeah, I did have one of the gamers ask me if he could move the fence with him.
Oh, that's an interesting one. we had a guy. We have got a guy at the club in Leeds who's very similar. I'm not going to mention his name, but every time so you'll be moving a couple of units, and you might need to just slightly move a wall so you can get one line next to the other, and his name is now synonymous with that tactic. It's called I can't say what his name, but let's say Pete. I'm doing a Pete. You just move the wall so you can get the two units.
Yeah. So absolutely.
Listening to your podcast with Henry, you've done a few battlefield walks. Is that right?
Yes, but I mean the majority are Napoleonic. I've done some of the First World War ones, up and down the Somme Valley.
Yeah.
It's quite moving. I think you can't fail to be moved by it.
No.
And one in particular I do revisit quite frequently is the battlefield of Waterloo. So, you know, we go back, my wife and I stay over there probably 2-3 times a year. And I'll walk around the battlefield, taking it in, you know, it's just to see it's very good. It's very well to look at the battlefield on the tabletop. And my last visit to Waterloo drove me to change how I played Waterloo at the centre.
Right, yeah.
So doing things like Plancenoir, I ran a mega weekend and I ran Plancenoir as a fight in isolation to the Battle of Waterloo.
Yeah.
And that worked really well, you know, because when you stand in Plancenoir and look over to the northeast, where the Prussians are coming from, you can't see the lay of the land, because the land rolls. You'd lose visibility of these guys. So how on earth they defended it? It would be quite close, you know. And I think it was. Anything you read about it, it is very, very close in fighting.
Have you ever stayed in the? Because you can stay in Hougoumont now, can't you? There's a little flat above the gate. Have you ever stayed there?
No.
We
I'm too superstitious, Ken. I'd be waking up in the night saying, "What the hell? What was that? Did you hear that?"
we looked at it for one of my big number birthdays. I can't remember now. I've had so many of them, and it wasn't as expensive as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be absolutely ridiculous.
That's because of the ghosts, Ken.
I'll wear my Bradford City top. That'll scare them away. No, I've not. We've talked about it, and the gaming lot here have talked about it a few times, but we've never been. I've never actually know anyone who's actually stayed there, because I think it would be quite interesting.
They've done some. Yeah, I mean the whole place. When I first went there, you could just walk in to the courtyard of the farm. And it, you know, it was dilapidated. It was quite run down. There were people still living there when we first went to Waterloo, and just walking around the chateau itself, not inside obviously, but you know, the grounds of the chateau, and walking around the outside, you get a whole different feel. Anything you read about it doesn't lend to, you know, the mountain these guys must have had to climb, A, in defending it, and B, in actually getting into it. Because it's just a bastion. It's, you know, the walls are high enough and they're very thick.
Have you been back since it's all been done up with the video presentation and... I did a YouTube video of my walk around it, probably 2019. Oh, good, yeah. Because when I first went, it was all boarded up. You couldn't get anywhere near it, and there was signs at the end of the road going private land, don't come in, etc. And we deliberately went back, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, and it was great to get inside and have a look around. And I didn't quite realise how big the garden was, or the orchard as it was called. It's huge, and looking through those little holes in the wall. You can just imagine the French coming towards it, looking at your brown best, going, "How am I going to stop that lot with this?"
Yeah, exactly.
What's your current project then, Mark? What are you working on at the moment, wargaming wise?
Oh, I mean, cool. God, current project is World War II. I'm doing some work on a chain of command exercise to do around Pegasus Bridge.
Yeah.
And the campaign, you know, post D-Day. So I'm trying to I am stringing together some scenarios to allow us to, you know, do the fighting around Pegasus Bridge and the holding of the bridge, and the Marine Commando landings and all that sort of thing, and pushing up the river. So that's where we are at the moment. I'm also working on some Napoleonic scenarios for General d'Armée. I don't stick to just the one rule set at the centre. I tend to mix it a bit. So I worked quite hard on the General de Brigade and General d'Armée aspect. Dave Brown's been very supportive with it, so you know he comes along once a year with his crew, and you know the Loughton Strike Force lads, and you know they do a fantastic game system, and they're a good bunch of lads. They all have a good laugh, and you know members of the public join in. So And then, the common thing there, Ken, is that you've all got a common interest.
Exactly.
Even if you turn up on your own, you walk into the bar, you get introduced to everybody, you pick the sides and all that good stuff. And I've not had anybody feel, within minutes you're at ease. I've not had anybody, not feel that. So that's for me, that's the win. That's what I really want guys to do. I want them to come along, have the best experience that's, mirroring what I had.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because it was I couldn't sleep, honestly.
That's proper enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, it was like being 9 years old on Christmas Eve again, I tell you.
Well, that's probably a good place just to take a little short break, because we're going to talk about big games next, and that just capture that enthusiasm, because that's exactly what we want to talk about in the next section. There we go. So, as regular listeners will know, in the second part of the podcast, we like to talk about big games, and I think we've probably got the right man here. And just before we came to the end of the first section, we got a little bit of that enthusiasm coming through there for the big game. So you talked about going into the old Wargames Holiday Centre up at Scarborough, or near Scarborough. What was that feeling like for you? How did that impact on you and your gaming?
I guess getting there, I didn't have an overly, I hadn't had there was no preconception of what I was to expect. I'd seen the stuff in the magazines, and that looked grand, but it didn't look like anything that couldn't have been put onto a 6x4 table.
Yeah.
So walking through the door, meeting Peter Gilder for that first time, and looking at the table, arrayed in front of me was 27 feet by 12 feet of Wargames table that had sculpted terrain to reflect the battlefield. So, you had the Colocha River, you had the Great Redoubt, the Fleshes, the Utits, the village, the woodlands. And Peter really had a knack for, he would just look like he was chucking stuff on the table. But when you step back, he had a natural talent for making it somehow look realistic. So, when I took it all in, I was like, oh my God, I didn't care about the figures. I was just looking at the table for what must have been, it felt like minutes, but it was hours, and then we got to divvy up all the forces. So I can't remember, there was only about 8 guys there on that weekend, so but it was 4 aside. So we had, in essence, we had the best part of 2 corps apiece. And back in those days, that wasn't a huge amount of figures by the standards of where we've aspired to with the Wargames Centre now, but back in that day it was still more than I'd ever owned. It was 16 battalions of 28mm figures, and two regiments of light cavalry, and then there was the heavy cavalry corps and all that good stuff. And the rules were a revelation as well, Ken. I think I was very much, the only thing I'd played prior to that was Newbury rules.
Oh, my condolences.
And WRG. So that kind of. It didn't kill it for me, but I wasn't, it didn't flick any switches with me. Whereas I started doing the stuff with Peter, and, I was having fun. And the feel of it, of it, it still came across. It still felt like it should do with a Napoleonic battle. So, and I never looked back. I think I went up there in 86, and I got home at the end of the weekend. I got home. It used to take us about 5 hours driving up there and then back.
Yeah, well, the scenery is, once you get north to Sheffield, the scenery is brilliant.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Never boring.
Never boring. Coalfield National Park, Coalfield, disused steelworks. It's all up here, mate. It's all up here.
Oh no, I never found that for a minute. That drive, getting onto the A419 at the end from the M62 to Scarborough. It was almost like coming home. That's what it got to be. That's what it felt like. It was great. Absolutely great.
And so do you look at big games? Do you go to Wargames shows? Do you go to the like Salute and Colours and places like that?
Yeah, I mean, I go to Salute, go to Colours, I go to Warfare, which is in Reading as well. I go to the Devices game because there's a load of lads I know in the Devices club that used to do all the 40k circuits.
Yeah.
And, you know, great bunch of lads. We'd all get together for a beer, and yes, you do, like normal human beings, I suppose. But yeah, invariably I go to the shows, I guess, to try and do a little bit of marketing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wear a polo shirt with the Wargames Centre on the back and what games we're doing next year and that kind of thing. And I've got to, you know, meet and work with some really, really decent guys in the hobby. You know, there's some, you know yourself, Ken, there's some great characters in the hobby. And, you know, I've got to meet quite a lot of them. So I'm privileged in that perspective.
And when you're going around those shows, is it the big games that you're drawn to? Is that where your eye wanders?
Not always, because for me, as I said, it's about the uniforms. If I see something that's out there that's really done well and painted nicely, and for me, the key thing in a game is not just about the figures. The key is how it looks. Yeah, it's got, you know, the terrain needs to be right. If you're going to spend all this time and money in painting and building your army, your figures, why would you just put it on a tablecloth? That's just my personal opinion. Yeah, you know. So I like, you know, I'll look at all aspects of the hobby, but, you know, of course, everybody's drawn to the big games. Really good mate of mine, John Lander, ran some demonstration games at Salute for a number of years, and it was all 1/32 54mm World War II. And then he did one about 7 years ago, which was all the ancients. We did the battle, I can't remember the battle now. It was Carthaginians versus Polybian Romans. It was all in 54mm. Oh, you know, it was fantastic. Fantastic stuff.
I love that sort of stuff, because you look at your own collection and you think, I'm a bit mad, mate, and then you look at and then somebody else has done it in 54mm and you think, no, I'm perfectly normal, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the best stories that John told me, they were doing what they were doing. They were doing a World War II exercise, and it was not Sanders there, the Campbelltown. So he's wheeling the Campbelltown on a trolley, right? And he's got a klaxon, the wind-up klaxon, and he's wheeling the Campbelltown. And the plan was, while the game was in flow, he was going to wheel the Campbelltown from the entrance past the traders, and then as soon as one of the traders said, "That's the Campbelltown, isn't it?" he was then going to start the siren.
Oh,
keep
brilliant!
It going toward the table. That was part of the game. That's
awesome. There's certainly we tend to gravitate eccentrics towards our hobby, I would say. And people like that, I just absolutely love it. I love that sense of enthusiasm and comedic sense as well when it comes to games, because some people can be very, very stuffy, but that sort of thing I absolutely love. When I started this podcast, I did a little bit of a pilot episode and just sort of went and talked about what I was trying to aim with it, which was obviously to bring back the love of the big game, which is kind of fallen out of favour a little bit, I think, at the moment. And I tried to define what a big game was. Is that something you could try, Mark? Do you think you could define what a big game was?
I think for me, a big game, certainly a number of figures. You need a fair few figures. But the big game is where you can have a big table and plenty of terrain on it that looks the part. Because like I said about my exercise with Peter Gilder and the Borodino table, you know, when you walk in and you look at it and it takes your breath away. Yeah. So, and, you know, I'm going to blow my own trumpet here. I've got a friend of mine, Chris Cornwall. He's the itinerant gamer, if anybody follows the YouTube stuff. And he has a natural eye for building a table for World War II like no one else. So he does a lot of my chain of command tables, and he'll do the World War II stuff at 28mm scale. And then I've got a friend of mine, Paul Goodwin, does the same for the rapid fire weekends that we do for the 20mm scale.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of Chris's stuff on. I think it's Twitter. I think I follow him on, or I've seen him on. He's done some Italian War stuff.
That's right,
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think you've kind of covered what the joy of the big game is. We've talked about the spectacle.
Yeah.
What other aspects of the big game draw you to that side of gaming?
I think it's meeting new people, the camaraderie that it brings, because getting into those big games, you don't necessarily get it all from the local lads. You've got to bring other people in.
Yeah.
So and that's if you're doing it as a club, fine, you'll have a number of guys, but invariably you'll need to get somebody else in, and I think that's a great aspect to the hobby. You need to be doing that.
Yeah.
When I get guys coming to the Wargames Centre, the one thing I really strive to achieve is that A, they enjoy themselves, and B, they get to know the other players and they get to interact with those other players. Because I've got mates. I've got a mate of mine, Paul Williamson. I've known him since I went up there in '86. I'd never have met him if I hadn't gone there. And he's still one of my best mates right now. So, and I met a number of people. Noel Bilson in Plymouth. The list goes on. And I've met a number of people. Dave Doherty, he does a lot of the Sudan stuff for me. I met Dave in Scarborough. It's that kind of feel. And I think
Dave Doherty, the man with a million camels.
You asked the fella. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the Analog Hobbies Winter Paint Challenge. It's something that happens. It happens every year, and there's about 100.
I have heard of it.
There's about 100 people from around the world who take part, and Dave and myself are two of the regulars. And every time it's like, Dave, how many camels do you need, mate? He
does paint a mean camel. Ken.
Well, he's had enough bloody practice, is what I say. So, I think as well, something I discussed on the last episode, and you might be probably one of the best people to kind of comment on this. There's a type of gamer, the competition gamer, who's very, very serious, doesn't like a laugh, can sometimes be quite argumentative as well. But I haven't really, in my time of gaming, come across them in a big game setting. I found big games to be very social, very fun to play, with a lot of banter between the players. Is that something you've seen at the Holiday Centre?
I get a mix. I still get a mix, Ken. And I think that's a good thing. That is a good thing. I'd say a number of those guys who are very sensible about their gaming. They're not incapable of having a laugh, and invariably we do end up having a laugh. Yeah. But I think on the whole, the gregarious aspect of it, because you need guys that are not too bothered about coming in and meeting people. But I do get the other end of that spectrum, which is the guy who's quite shy and understand and has read his history. He knows how the battle is supposed to be fought out. But at the centre, of course, we never follow the history pattern. There's the battlefield's the same, but it's up to them how they deploy it. So all that lends to it. The guys have to engage. Yeah, they have, and there's not too much stigma attached to knowing all the ins and outs of how the battle progressed on the date of the event. But so for me, there's a mix out there, and I'm quite happy to embrace any of them, to be honest.
Well, we're going to cover quite a lot of the other stuff that I would normally talk to people about in this section in when we talk about the Wargames Holiday Centre at the end. So I'm just going to draw a line under that section for now, and then I've hope you've been revising in your Yorkshire guides for the Great Yorkshire Quiz, which is coming up.
Oh God!
Which is coming up after the break. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Mark Freeth. And Mark, were you born down south, Mark?
Yes, I was born in West London.
Ah, right. So for How Yorkshire Gamer Are You, the quiz, you are already...
Handicap.
I wasn't going to use that word, but
okay.
Yeah. Well, when when we did this the first episode, I had a chap called Gareth Lane on from Wales, and he didn't even know where a couple of the places were on the quiz. So,
okay. That might be me.
That might be you. So, as they say to the kids today, there's no pass or fail. And this merely is just some snapshot questions about the hobby, with a few funny ones thrown in, and it will either be yes or no, or a choice of one or the other. And at the end, we'll just see how Yorkshire Gamer you are. And being quite Yorkshire Gamer is not necessarily a good thing. So, so if you're ready to go, mate, I'll just ask the first question.
Yeah, I am.
So, go big or go home?
Was that a question?
That's a question.
Was a statement.
No. Go big.
Go big.
Go big. Good lad. Contrast paints, are they great or are they a gimmick?
Gimmick.
Windsor and Newton brushes or Yorkshire made Pro Art?
Yorkshire made Pro Art.
96 figures. Is that an army or a pike block?
You know the answer to that, don't you? Come on. It's a pike block.
Hey. 6 foot by 4 foot table. Is that a big game or a small game?
That's a preparatory table. A small game.
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble now. Right. Do you want a points-based army or an historical order of battle?
Historical order of battle.
When you're painting figures, would you use a wet palette to mix your paint or an old bit of MDF?
An old bit of MDF.
You're doing quite well so far. Undercoat figures, black or white?
Black, every time.
There's an explanation available for this if you need it. Would you ever run a list?
Yes. Invariably, I do that at my gaming weekends. So, yes.
Another pipe block question. Do you like pipe blocks tightly packed or socially distanced?
Tightly packed.
Tightly packed.
Yeah.
This one's a given for you. A 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Weekend monster game.
Competition or campaign game?
Campaign.
Controversial one. Round dice, are they allowed or banned?
I don't ban anything. If somebody wants to use it for themselves, that's fine.
Trust me, you need to ban them. Would you pay 33 pence for a communist?
For a what?
For a communist.
What is I know what a communist is, but why would I pay 33 pence for it? No, probably not. Then.
No, good lad. I'll explain that later on if you need it.
Okay.
Do you like a good table in a set of rules, like a casualty table or something similar?
No.
28.
There's some irony in there. There's some irony in there.
28 mil is king, yes or no?
Yes.
Unpainted miniatures allowed on the table, yes or no?
No. Emphatically no, Ken.
2 deal breaker questions coming up, question 18 and 19. Bradford City or Leeds United?
Leeds United.
Oh.
Sorry, Ken. Sorry, I've got history. I can't help it. Mike Ingham was a lifelong. He was lifelong Leeds fan.
He was Mike. Yeah, I'd never forgive him for that. Yeah. Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
Yorkshire.
Good. And finally, Games Workshop, are they the work of the devil?
No. Anything that encourages the hobby to the degree they do. I should not embellish it. Just the answer, no.
No. Well, you'll be glad to know, Mark, you've done reasonably well there. 75%. 75% will put you in third place. And you are in third place behind Richard Harris, who was born and bred Yorkshire, and who I've gamed with all my life. And he only dropped points because he supports Leeds. So and second place, which has gone to a Doctor of Medieval Scottish History. So I think you are quite well placed there with 75%.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, that's great.
So have you not seen round or spherical dice is probably the best thing?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. The thing I would do, Ken, if a guy turns up at the centre to use them, then no. But, if I turn up at a tournament and he starts rolling those dice, I'd be absolutely fine with it. But I'd ask him if I could roll them for me as well.
Yeah. Well, somebody brought them here at Yorkshire Gamer. We've got a regular group of guys who come around and game all the time. And they rolled a handful of them from melee or whatever. And four of them shot 12 foot across the table, knocking a couple of pikes off and a couple of flags, and then dropped off the other end.
Maybe you just insist on a little one of those dice pods that you can roll them in. That's it.
No, well, to be fair, I insisted that he never brought them again. That was the problem.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
So thanks very much for taking part in that little fun quiz, Mark. We'll be back to the main topic in a second. So there we go. We've got the fun and jollity out of the way. We're going to talk serious stuff now, honestly.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the Wargames Holiday Centre. And you mentioned in the start or in one of the earlier sections about that first visit and how it kind of blew you away, the setup, the terrain, etc. Just go through then the history. You were going there a lot, and I think you mentioned Peter, and then Mike Ingham took over from Pete. Just talk about that history up until when it closed down up in God's own county.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, as I said, I met Peter back in '86. I came home. I rang him the night I got home and said, "When's the next one?"
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah, and that was the Battle Honours. Well, I suppose it was an award weekend. So if you bought a number of figures, you got entered into this raffle.
Yeah,
and the raffle prize was a place. So Tony Barton was there. The fella who owned Danny, I can't remember his name now, Danny. But the guy who owned AB Miniatures, I mean, back in the day, it was Battle Honours.
It was Battle Honours when it started, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so I went up there and we did Leipzig. Oh, my God, Ken. Oh, my God. Because, you can imagine you've got two tables that are 6 foot wide, 27 foot long, each of them. And then you've got a 3 foot under the window, which is, again, 27 feet long. And the middle bit between the two 6 foot width tables, that was the city of Leipzig. And so you could play all around the city. And, the guys who were the French, they were inside the city. They'd have to crawl out, after go to the toilet, hands and knees down the gangway to get out, crawling under the boards. It was like, the Goon Show, what was his name? Michael Bentine's Party Time. Oh, brilliant. People coming up in the middle to play the bit. Because the city walls were all around the outside. But that was one of those experiences that, I just blew me away. Yeah. And then, of course, progressively, unfortunately, Peter not unfortunately at the time because he was quite healthy, but he sold it to Mike Ingham. Yeah, Mike was an investment banker in the city, and he was a finance man, so he was really sharp. He came up, retired at 35.
Bless him.
Yeah. And he took on the centre, and he was very much the historian. So he was driving at getting the campaigns and doing the week-long campaigns. So I signed up for every single one of those. I never spent any time with my kids. It was like, 4 weeks of the year I'd be in Scarborough. And doing all that, really, I built a good rapport with Mike. We used to go on holiday, do the battlefield tours, myself and this chap I mentioned earlier, Paul Williamson from Belfast. And we'd go around and do the World War I battlefields because that was a real interest of Mike's, was the World War I battlefields. And then we'd take in some of the later Napoleonic battlefields like Craon, Mery-sur-Seine, and all those, the little ones in 1814 that were fought in France. We'd take all those in. And then obviously Mike, change of roles. He had to go back to work for a little while, and he was helping out a friend of his with Eagle Star Insurance. So he went back to London for a while, and he brought another friend of mine, Jerry Elliott, in.
Yeah.
And Jerry used to run the Wargames Centre, or in partnership with Mike. And Jerry brought in quite a large collection of his figures to add to it. So the collection grew exponentially, overnight, more or less. And then I think Jerry was running it with Mike probably, must have been about 15 years, 16 years, something like that. It was quite a while.
My involvement with the centre with Jerry, so it was during that time that I was painting for them. So because all my dealings with Jerry were with Jerry, so maybe Mike had gone down to London at that point. Yeah,
and then Mike got taken poorly, and there was talk about shutting it down altogether. And Mike, I think Mike bought Jerry out, so that was done. I think that's the way it went. I'm guessing here. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. So Jerry now does his own thing. He's got his own little setup there. So he does his 10 mil stuff. And Mike had spoken to me about, this is prior to all this happening. Mike had spoken to me in the past about really he'd always wanted to move it south, to put it more of a central location in the country. So he was looking at Leicester.
What, Leeds?
No,
not Central Yorkshire. Not Central Yorkshire. Not Leeds.
Sorry, mate. No. It went even further south. It was like Leicester, but more of the central area of the country. Yeah. Nosebleed country. So he was looking at that. So, of course, where I come from, I'm slap bang in the middle between Gatwick and Heathrow. Access from the ports on the south coast is quite easy. It just made a lot of sense to move it down here. So Mike sold some of the collection, not a lot of it, and then he said to me, well, look, if you take it south and run it down there, we'll run it as a partnership. And that's what I did. So once poor Mike was taken terminally ill, shortly after we'd agreed to, while we were negotiating all this and getting it sorted. And sadly, he passed away before I could open it.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, very much so. So now, the silent partner, if you will, is Margaret, which is his wife.
Yeah.
But, we do it for the love of it. It's not, we never make any real money out of it. So, and I get a real buzz out of it, Ken. Yeah. I do enjoy it. I enjoy, and like I said right at the beginning, you just make a lot of friends. So since I've been running it,
What year was that then? What year did it move down south? Because I have to admit, after it left Yorkshire, I kind of lost track of where we were with it.
Interest is the word, Ken. Is that what you're looking for?
It's like it's moved out of Yorkshire. Who cares? not that we're partisan up here. We thought Brexit was Yorkshire leaving England.
Brilliant. So that was. I moved it down here in late 2010 and opened the doors in February 2011.
So one question that has come up during because other people have mentioned the Wargames Holiday Centre during these podcasts, is how the bloody hell did you move all them figures down? Apart from very carefully.
Yeah, it was very, very carefully. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So
some of them are Yorkshire Gamer figures. They're worth brass. They're worth a lot of money.
None of my figures aren't, mate. They're all worth a lot of money.
So go on. I was sorry, Mark. You were saying, you got them down.
So a couple of my mates own, transit vans, that kind of thing. So over a period of time, we'd fill up a transit, bring it down, unload it. So oddly enough, I went to the supermarkets and got those really useful, those green boxes they pack the vegetables in, because they stack right up as well.
And they're free. And they're free.
And they're free. That's the big thing. So I mean, I got loads of those, Ken, and I moved all that down. All the boards were moved down, as you imagine, very carefully. And I think the last one was a 6-ton lorry, which I took up there, put all the boards into it. The tables that Peter put in, they're still up there. They're still there.
Yeah.
But everything else has come back down. The only thing I haven't brought down from Yorkshire is the Renaissance figures. So I've got quite a large collection of Italian wars.
Yeah, because I was going to ask about them. I'd not seen them. Obviously, I don't know if you've seen my interest in the Italian wars. That's one of my big periods, and I did wonder what had happened to that collection, because one of the inspirational things for me in the hobby was, I think it was Wargames Illustrated, or Miniature Wargames, either number 1 or number 2. It had a picture of Peter Gilder's French gendarme on the front cover. And I remember looking at that and going, "You see that there? That, Mum, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do." Yeah. So who's got those now? Do you know those figures?
Oh, they're still sat in Scarborough.
All right. Leave us an address, mate. I'll pick them up for you.
Good luck getting past the dogs, Ken.
Oh, is it one of them? One of the dogs running loose? One of them houses?
No. Margaret's got a lovely. Well, she did have. In fairness, she hasn't got that anymore. So I mean, I was only joking, but
yeah,
she did have a couple of Alsatians that were big. Big Alsatians. We put the fear of God into you as soon as you look over the fence.
Yeah, well, I've got a big Alsatian German Shepherd here, and you have to be liked by him for you to war game at Yorkshire Gamer. You need to be liked by the, because the last thing I want is him running away with someone's arm in the middle of a game. That blood pumping out on me lovely figures.
Yeah.
So, well, that's answered one of my questions then, where those Renaissance figures are now. So did you go up as the move was going on, or did you just receive the figures at the other end?
I did all of it. Did the move.
You did the move. I would imagine that would have been melancholy, was it, when it was empty, room? Yeah.
Yeah. It's still now. I go up there and walk into that empty space.
Yeah.
It is eerie.
Yeah,
it's eerie because you've got so many memories.
Yeah, I remember going in there, and it would be strange to think what it looks like now compared to how it was.
Well, no, Ken, it's not dilapidated. It looks pretty much the same, but it hasn't got any terrain boards on the top, and obviously all the shelving's empty.
Just from the Renaissance army.
Yeah, apart from the Renaissance shelving, which is full. But we've still got a lot of Peter's terrain, the little diorama stuff that he had. So he made all the bell tent type affairs.
Yeah.
The striped canvas type, like a medieval tents.
Yeah.
He made a lot of those by hand. So a load of that stuff's still there.
Yeah, it's all like museum pieces, if you like. If there was if there was a War Games museum, I think some of those pieces would go in there. There's a guy called Robbie Roddis. Do you know Robbie?
I know. Yeah, he came down.
Yeah, he
came to the Don Featherstone.
Oh, brilliant! He's got a website dedicated to Peter. And he's got lots of old news clippings and stuff on there, and lots. I think he might have some of his figures as well, possibly.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I'll ask him nicely. I'll ask Robbie if he'll come on and have a chat about Peter. I think that'd be a really good. That would be a really good episode. So on our continuing soap opera of Wargames Holiday Centre down south, you've moved everything down south. What happened then? How did you get set up down there?
Well, I had a huge unit. I had a unit that was 1,600 square feet. So I easily put the tables in. I had a breakout area with sofas and dining room tables for the guys to eat their lunch, and all my lunches invariably are buffet served lunches. And it was a big kitchen area, bathroom area, that sort of thing. So it was enormous. And I stayed in that unit up until 5 years ago, I think it was. And then I thought to myself, hang on a minute, there was huge tracts of the table that never got used.
Yeah.
And, when you start to look at something, and I'd been there, and while you like to have the space, it becomes a little bit unnecessary because, the back end of the 6-foot table, because I had 2 6-foot wide, 27 feet long tables, the back end of the 6-foot table just never got used. People put their coats on it. That was it, never got used.
Was that the same setup that was in the Holiday Centre with the 2 rows of play tables and then like the reserve table at the back?
You got it. Yeah. And I just never got to use it, Ken. So, I mean, there were certain battles where it mattered, but I just ran the figures in my head and I thought, well, realistically, what am I doing? If I use this back 6-foot table and the figures come in, all I've got to do is add 36 inches to the reserve roll. So break that 36 inches down into a movement ratio and add that many turns to the reserve roll.
Yeah.
And then, hey presto, the reserves are arriving. You're just not moving the tiles on that back 6-foot table.
Yeah, past all the copes.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it just made more sense to then, scale it down. Lose just 3 foot of the table. That's all I did. And I moved it into the single unit. And then, of course, we stayed there for 5 years. And great success, from the fact that I've got a number of clubs that book, like the Leeds lads do. They come along and they say, can I book it out this weekend? And can we use our own rules? Well, fill your boots, And I get a lot of that. I still use Peter's rules in the Gun Manor. That's the mainstay of what we do. We've tweaked it a lot because, let's be honest, it's probably the most play-tested set of rules on the planet.
Without a doubt.
It's always getting used every weekend sort of thing. So they have been, we've worked on them. Melees are different. Village fighting's different. Fighting in woods is different to how Peter envisaged it. But we haven't moved it on, it's not great leaps. It's not completely different. But it's just a little bit more practical, a little bit more sensible, better feel about it, all that good stuff.
And did you say you'd moved again from there? Or did you say you'd gone into a hotel now?
Yeah, because I have a good relationship with the local hotels. And one of the hotels I was talking to, the Holiday Inn in Basingstoke, have got a huge conference area that wasn't getting used very much. So I kind of thought to myself, well, I'll run some of the ancient weekends. So, and I don't mean the players, I mean the figures.
I think they're probably both one in the same, to be honest.
I run some of these ancient weekends. And oddly enough, you talked about going to shows and whatnot, I met Simon at Colours, and Simon was running one of the strongest demonstration games. Our eyes met across a crowded Wargames venue, and I thought, what on earth's that lad doing on his own? Because he was on his own. And I walked out because I had my stall, for the Wargames Centre and big boards and video and all that sort of stuff. And I walked over there and I saw what he was doing with this Roman. He had a Roman Civil War game on, but he was using cards and there were no tape measures. I thought, oh, that's intriguing, simply from the fact that it's removed a lot of the things that would cause argument between wargamers.
Yeah.
And talking to Simon, that's exactly why he developed the rules, because he had an episode that led him to think, right, I never want to be in that position with a mate of mine again, where we're debating something and it almost becomes heated. And he said, right, that's it, I'm going to do this. And he came up with these rules to the strongest. And it was a bit of an epiphany for me, because prior to that, I was using DBM for Ancients, not at the centre, but outside the centre. And that got me back into gaming. And that was a good friend of mine from the Welsh side of the Wargame fraternity, who, he said to me, you've got to try this. He'd been playtesting it with his club in Swansea. Fantastic stuff. And meeting Simon, I said to him, why don't you come along to the centre? And he did. Looking at the hotel, coming back to my story, this is like... God, I'm like Billy Connolly, aren't I? There's all that all the way around the house to get back to the story. And I said to Simon, let's put the war game on in the hotel. So I think we had 6 games on in the one conference room. We could bring 30, I think we had 30 players on that first weekend.
Yeah.
They all got to play each of those big battles at least once.
Oh, that's good.
The battles take about 3 to 4 hours to play, and it's using his card system and the grid system. So there was less, very little debate over movement or, the rules aspects. And we did that. I think we probably did that about 5 or 6 times. So I knew it would work in the hotels. One thing I was conscious of, people always say, well, we've got a backache leaning over this, but they don't. It just doesn't come about because guys sit down.
Yeah.
And once they've done their moving, they tend to sit down, and then they'll start talking, and they roll the dice and they mark things off. So it's even a little bit more comfortable, if that makes sense. Because all my table, if you'll remember at Scarborough, Ken, they come up to your waist.
Yeah,
they're that high. The tables.
Yeah,
you'd need stools and a firing step to get in and reach the middle of the table. If you remember.
I think that was to keep people's stomachs below the table level, wasn't it? I think that's why it was specifically designed to hide people's stomachs.
Yeah, indeed. So running it at the hotel, I've already signed up for, I think I've got 8 games coming up for this year now. And it was and I'd always planned to do it, but I was only going to do it at the beginning of this year. But of course, COVID kicking in and us being told you couldn't do any more of this social gathering in February of last year, it just brought that whole business plan forward.
And has everything gone across to the hotel? Has all the figures gone, or have you still got?
No, I've got local storage for that. So I mean, one other aspect of the centre is that I use a variety of rule sets, and what I want to do is I've got a cabin in the garden, who hasn't these days? But I've got quite a large cabin which I'm using for storage. So I've got all of the centres, the ranges for the ACW, the Marbury, and the World War II in 20mm and 28mm. I've got that stored down there, as well as a lot of the terrain in really useful boxes. And I don't mean the vegetable cartons.
Oh, we've gone posh now. We're spending money on plastic nowadays. Right?
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way. And then I've got all the boards and the Napoleonics are all in the garage, which is integral to the house.
Yeah.
So I've got a little van. I put them all in the little van, run it down there, lay the tables out. I'm blessed in the sense that I only work 4 days a week, job, But Fridays, like today, is a day where I can do that kind of thing. And I know that it'll take me, I don't know, the first time I do it, it might take me 3 or 4 hours to set it up. Yeah. But I'll have plenty of time to do that, Ken. So, and it makes more sense because the guys come into the hotel, they have breakfast there. I've got a really good rate for bed and breakfast. It's like 50 quid or 57 quid bed and breakfast, which is great down here.
But down south, you get a week full board up here for that with a sea view. Oh, that is good down. That is good down there, I have to say. So the hotel that gaming in is where people stay then, so that makes life a lot easier, doesn't it? So
apart from the bar,
out
of the bar.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So that's where you are now with the Holiday Centre. So in terms of figures, collections of figures, what did you bring down from Scarborough, and what have you added to that since?
So brought down Napoleonic. Obviously, quite a large collection. 40, it must be nearly 40,000 figures.
Yeah.
Hang on, no. So the 40,000 figures, that's realistically everything. So you're talking 20 to 30,000 is the Napoleonic stuff, and then you've got the ACW, which is a large collection that that Jerry put together. Yeah. We've got the Marbury collection, which is the one Mike worked on. I've been adding to that since we brought it down. I've also added to the American Civil War collection, and we've got a couple of ranges of World War II. We've got 28mm because I like that scale. Yeah. And I like the buildings that you can get with it. The whole look of the table, it just upscales it, so everything's far more visible, obviously. Yeah. I wanted to do 1/32nd, and I started doing that. I bought huge collections of Russians and Germans to do it in 1/32nd, and I thought, what on earth are you doing that? I'm adding a third scale to something I'm doing. But and that's John Lander's fault, because John was the one who put the Arnhem game on at the Wargames Centre, and some of the pictures I got from that, Ken, for me, are the best photographs I've ever taken in wargaming.
Yeah,
you know, they're just amazing, and I love that. I love the World War II stuff. So my additions are lots and lots of Napoleonics.
Yeah,
lots of Napoleon. That's my main passion.
Yeah,
and I as mentioned, I was hosting a one weekend a year, which was for fantasy wargaming. So the guys would turn up doing their Warhammer stuff, and then I get guys who play Ancients, play Medieval, who might have an interest in, you know, they look over the fence and think, oh, what are they doing over there? What's that? You know, that's a bit of interest. But they don't necessarily own anything. So I bought quite large collections together of fantasy, you know, big armies that are ogres or orcs or goblins or dwarves or whatever it might be. So I've added all that to it. We still run that. Well, the plan is to run that once a year. And I get a lot of guys who migrate from doing the science fiction stuff who've never seen World War II.
Right.
And they look at it and they go, "Well, hang on a minute, those tanks are cool. What the hell are they?"
Yeah.
And it literally is as naive as that sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, you just got a bit of explaining, and they're like, "Wow, that's a Tiger One. Okay, great. You know, well, what's this? A Cromwell? Fantastic." And they look at all the tanks first, invariably, and then it works into the history of it. And you know, they know D-Day, because this is a younger audience to a degree.
Yeah,
you know, and they know about D-Day and they know about World War II, but it's not really piqued their interest because they've steered themselves down that road of dealing with, you know, Games Workshop stuff.
Yeah, I think people come into the hobby in different ways now, and through science fiction tends to be the main way, and they don't have that first-hand experience that I think we're about the same age, and so my grandparents were in the Second World War, so we had that direct connection with it, and we spoke to people who fought in the war and had that fascination, whereas today, and you see it in some of the language that people use. So people talk about factions instead of Germans and British, and it's starting to become a game rather than something that we think of as very recent history. And it's happening. It's happening in our lifetime, which is very interesting to see. And a lot of people kind of think about tanks as like Space Marines and stuff like that. They want the best one, rather than the one that was actually there at the time.
Yeah, look, there is an element of that. I mean, but I think I'll say hand on heart, the guys that used to come and do the tournament stuff for 40k, I've got quite a significant audience came across to do the World War II.
Yeah.
So they'd come along with, and they were using the old Peter Gilder rules, which you know is what became rapid fire.
Yeah.
You know, and we use those at the centre. I got a lot of time for them. You know, they're really they're good, straightforward stuff.
It's great to get anybody to cross into historicals, however they play it, and then once that person is in playing historical wargaming, and then everyone starts to pique their interest to reading about history, and then and it's at that point when they've got the interest in history that they start to go, oh yeah, you can't have a Tiger tank in 1941, can you? Damn! What am I going to? But what you need to get them in to get them to that stage. So, if I wanted to come along, or if anyone who's listening wants to come along to the Wargames Holiday Centre, and let's assume that people who are listening have never been, or are just thinking about going to the first Wargames Holiday weekend, what happens? You know, how do I book it? And once I've booked it, what happens when I get there?
Well, you can book that up on the website. So you just look up Wargames Holiday Centre or wargameshc.co.uk.
Yeah.
You go onto that site. There's contact details there for me. You can drop me an email or you can call me. And then once that connection's made, I send out an information pack that gives you the breakdown of what the costs are.
Yeah.
So it's £170 for a weekend.
Yeah.
That's from the Friday afternoon through to the Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
That includes all the lunches and teas and coffees throughout the weekend.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got the bed and breakfast aspect of it. So you stay in the hotel. But the key thing is get in touch with me through the website. I've also got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff, Ken. So there's lots of social media of Wargames Holiday Centre out there. And basically, I'll give you all the information you need to book up and come down and take part.
So I've booked. I'm sat here in Leeds. It's 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. What time do I need to be up? I'm thinking it's back in Scarborough again. When do I need to pass the northern wall through Sheffield and come south? What's that thing in
the Rubicon?
What's that thing in Game of Thrones? That ginormous.
The
wall of ice that leads to the south.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
so it's. I think I'm just west of. Let me get my directions right. I'm just west of Basingstoke. Well, no, I'm in Basingstoke now. So Reading's to the northwest of Basingstoke. That's the biggest town, I guess you'd say. And if you're coming down from Leeds, it'll take you 4.5 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
But you come down, and invariably what we used to do, Ken, we'd go up and there'd be like 2 or 3 of us in the car.
Yeah.
So it's part of the holiday, almost.
And are you gaming on the Friday night, or are you organising on the Friday night? How does it work?
So we do the prep on the Friday night. So the guys will come along. They'll get their orders of battle. They'll get a look at the battlefield. They decide which sides they want to be on, obviously, and then they get their orders of battle. They come up with a plan for their force
for the first 10 minutes.
And
then it goes out the window.
You got it. Yeah, and then contact with the enemy. We'll screw that up, and then everything's put on tiles. So there's we use blinds at the beginning, so you can't tell what it is that you're up against. And that'll kick that. I start at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and they'll get 1 or 2, maybe 3. Sometimes I get half a dozen turns in that Friday evening, and then they go to the restaurant, have something to eat at the restaurant with the rest of the lads. A pint in a bar usually leads to 2 or 3 pints.
Yeah.
And then Saturday morning, they get up, have breakfast, and then it's back in the room 9:30, kick off again. And that goes through right up until 7:30 Saturday night.
Yeah.
And then Sunday, repeat, but up until 4 o'clock. And that's when we aim to finish at 4.
Brilliant. And that's an opportunity for people who don't have access to big collections and big rooms to have a go at a big game. What do you find? Do you still have like clubs who book an entire weekend out, or is it in most individuals?
Very much. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. So I've got a group of lads that come from all over the world. I've got guys coming in from Vienna. I've got guys who come in from. I've had chaps coming over from the States.
Yeah.
I've got club wise. I've got guys from the Reading and Newbury. I've got guys from Warrington, Manchester area. I've got guys from Blackpool.
Yeah.
East of England, I've got the Essex lads, the Loughton Strike Force. So there's I'd say there's probably about half a dozen clubs that book up with me frequently.
Yeah.
And they'll use a variety of rules. We use black powder, we use General d'Armée, we use General de Brigade. We were going to use Shaco just before the lockdown.
Yeah.
I'm not averse to any rule set. So I've got nothing I would. I'm not selfish about that. I'm quite open to anything.
So we've obviously had a global pandemic thing, and I knew it was bad because we couldn't play cricket anymore. So it must have been serious if cricket's off. What obviously you've been closed. When are you reopening, or when are you planning to reopen?
Yeah, so the first weekend's the 18th to the 20th of June, because the hotels aren't under the same restriction. They can actually, they can have people in. I mean, there's going to be some distancing, social distancing still within the environment. So we're going to be sensible about these things. And I'm very mindful of that whole aspect of it, Ken, as is the hotel, obviously. But the first weekend is going to be the 18th to 20th of June. So no prizes for guessing which battle we're going to be doing on that first weekend.
Yeah, it could be a tough one. That one decided. No. Did you manage? There was like a little break, wasn't there, like last time between the second and third lockdowns? Did you manage to open up again then, or you've been closed for a year?
No, closed the whole time. The whole time. Yeah, and in a way, I mentioned earlier that I took the lockdown and moved everything out of the unit.
Yeah.
And taking everything out and storing it locally here, it meant that it was impractical to do it anywhere else. And I wasn't going to rush back to, because the hotel was, they weren't as sure as we weren't, so there was nothing, and you were anticipating things were going to change, weren't you, if I'm honest? So, and in answer to your question, I've not done anything since, I think it was the first weekend in February of 2020.
So, have you got any plans for the future? Have you got any things that you're looking to add on to the list of stuff that you do, or any special events or anything?
So now this will interest you, because my mate Chris Cornwall's got a huge collection of Italian wars.
It's the second best in the country, I've heard, after one in Yorkshire.
Very good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris will be delighted to hear that, Ken. You must come down. So, Chris has got a huge collection of Renaissance. So what we're aiming to do is run some of the Italian War / early Renaissance battle weekends, and run those in conjunction with things like English Civil War. So there's a big aspect of English Civil War. Good friend of mine, Steve Thompson, he's got huge collections. He's hosting 3 games on the Don Featherstone weekend, for instance. And we're going to be refighting Isandlwana, and we're also doing Rorke's Drift and Nazine River. So Nazine River is one that's not really heard of. I may even be saying it wrong. That's how unheard of it is. But so that was where the Zulus obviously encountered them and trying to cross the river. So it was one of the columns of the imperialist columns. So we're doing all 3 battles at the hotel for the Don Featherstone weekend. And Steve's also got some. We've got the Boxer Rebellion stuff, if you remember that from the Wargames shows. So we're going to be doing some of that. So there's a whole raft of new additional material that's coming to the fore.
Oh, that sounds. It's nice to keep it fresh and have new things in for people to try out, and new periods for people to try out as well. You've actually mentioned the next thing on my list, which was the Don Featherstone weekend. How long's that been going now?
8 years.
8
years. And I've got a hardcore of guys that come along to it, but I also get a number of guys that come along, that are new, or they come intermittently. And I think some of that's a feel for, they love the camaraderie of it. I must have about, 10 guys who all know each other. They even get together in groups, and they're all on a male group, and they take the mickey out of each other and all this sort of thing. and then there must be, every year we get new faces, and so it's a real, and it's a tribute to the man, Do you use his rules or his scenarios from his books, or? So we try to use some of the scenarios from his books. We don't use his rules per se, but it's all played in the spirit of it. So brilliant. Chris Scott, who's the author, who's written quite a lot of material on military history and wargaming. He was really, really good friends with Don. So Chris comes along. He does a bit of an after-dinner speech for us. And it's in keeping, he keeps us straight on it. I go to Chris and say, what do you think of this? We're going to do that. He'd love that. He'd love that. Let's do that.
Oh,
and it's that kind of feel. And Chris bless him, was he was kind enough to come down and bring a load of the stuff, figures that Don owned, which we put on display for the weekend, so people can get a look at it and get a feel for the whole thing. And then each year we vote for the most gentlemanly gamer, which is essentially the best loser, really. And they all take a vote on it. Who's the best loser, or the most gentlemanly player? And then I've got a crystal tureen, which has been engraved with a British infantryman from the Zulu Wars, ironically, and a Zulu warrior. And either side of that, I put the date and the name of the guy who gets.
Oh, that's fantastic! Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So the guy who is keeping it in the spirit of the whole weekend and the gaming, his name gets put up there and immortalised, as it were. So I've got Charlie Wesencraft. He's on there.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of him at the weekend.
Yeah, and Henry's on there. Who else is on there? There's a number of guys that have won it over the years, and we also do on the Saturday night. We have a big, silver spoon type dinner affair. Yeah, everybody dresses up in their best bib and tucker, and we award a prize for the best dressed gentleman. So guys turn up and they're all in waistcoats and suits and period costume, that kind of thing. So and they take away the trophy for the year, and of course they got to bring it back next year. But they get to keep it.
That sounds fantastic. We've briefly covered rule sets, and you've kind of mentioned that you like to mix and match and use different ones. Yes. Do you have default sets, and then if other people ask, can we use this set of rules, you do it that way, or how does it work? I use default sets, obviously. So I'll advertise a weekend and I'll say this is a GDA weekend. Yeah. Or I'll advertise Napoleonic and it'll be ITGM in the Grand Manor. Yeah. But I do specify that with Grand Manor, it's an adapted version of it. Yeah. And the guys get, like, pre-gaming, they'll get all the amendments. I mean, I say all the amendments. It's not. It's on 2 sheets of A4. Back and front. It's not a huge change, but it makes the game a little bit more plausible and playable. And then I've got rapid fire is my 20mm range default. But Dave Brown's just brought out O Group. Yeah. That looks very, very good. Yeah, I've not had a chance to have a look through those yet, so it's on my list of things to do.
Yeah, so I'm obviously working with Dave with regard to the GDA side of things. I also do the chain of command as well. So for the 28mm, I don't do anything else, because for me, chain of command brought me back into World War II with it felt right. I wasn't seeing who was shooting at me until they started shooting at me. It's that kind, and that's how I imagined it should feel. Whether that's right or wrong, but that's how I felt it, and that whole feel of it. So Richard Clark and his guys, hats off to them. I use their rules for the 28mm weekends, and as I said, rapid fire for the 20mm. But I'm thinking about O Group as well for the 20mm, and the Mulburian stuff. I used to use Beneath the Lily Banners, because I don't think I'm incorrect here. Mike Ingham wrote rules for the Mulburian period because it was a baby of his. He loved it. And I believe the gentleman who drafted Beneath the Lily Banners took those rules and built on them.
Oh, right, okay.
So the basis of it was what Mike had envisaged. Yeah. And I quite like those. But I also use an adapted version of Black Powder for the War of the Spanish Succession, which works really well. Yeah.
When people come, then does it tend to be the older person rather than the younger gaming generation, or have you started to see young people come through?
No, I can count on one hand the amount of guys that come through that are beneath the age of 30. Yeah. So, and I think that's, it goes in cycles. So I'm getting a lot of interest. So like I talk about the 40k gamers, they're all young lads. So there is an interest in wargaming, but it's the aspect of that interest. Do you want it to, should it be history? or should it be the fact that we all get together and they learn their social skills and their numeracy skills and all that interaction stuff? I think the majority, I can say hand on heart, the majority of my gamers are 40 plus.
Because there does seem to be, and this is one of the reasons why I kind of started the podcast, was to talk more about big games. And there's a drive at the moment, and it's been around for quite a number of years, for smaller, compact, some people call them boutique games, on sort of 2 foot square, 3 foot square. And the rules are very, very simple, which is not a bad thing. But then it seems that the limelight has gone away from the big game. And I described it in one interview I did, where you've got a canyon, and on one side of the canyon you've got loads of 2-3 foot square tables, all brilliantly lit up with like fireworks behind them and a rock band playing music and loads of big plastic fingers going, look at this, look at this, look at this. And then you've got a ginormous canyon, and on the other side of that you've got a 27 foot table with 3,000 Napoleonic figures on, and a bloke with a little torch going, have a look at this, it's really nice. And there seems to be that canyon there, and are we getting people across?
I think it, it's an awareness exercise. So when you're doing things at the shows, there's some great work going on at the shows where they get people coming in, but a lot of it's down to the advertisers. The social media is lending a lot to that. So I think the reason we're not seeing guys coming into the shows is perhaps that's budgetary. Because a lot of these guys, they're going to have young families, and like me, Ken, I didn't have a huge collection, couldn't afford a huge collection because I was paying for the kids. So
do you not get them up the chimney like we do around here? 13,
trust me, I thought about it.
13, 14, they're down the mill.
Trust me, if I had the ability, I probably would. But I think that's the aspect. So I mean, I've got guys who have said to me quite openly, I'm not bothering to buy a collection because what I will do is get my fix by coming here.
And that's brilliant, and I'm really glad that people are doing that. Because there's a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, I love the stuff you've got, but I can't do that because space, because money, whatever." And I have to say, well, when I was 18, 19, I was a student and I had no space and I had no money. And it comes slowly, and as you get to the golden years of one's life, you are, some of us, and quite a lot of us, to be fair, because there are these little, what I've discovered since I've done this is there's these little silos of like 6 or 7, 8 wargamers in a little bunker somewhere with an absolutely fantastic collection of figures and terrain, all playing wonderful, wonderful games, and nobody knows anything about them at all.
But then I guess, I kind of understand that, because if you find yourself that niche, then why do you need to look anywhere else? I think a lot of these guys that I see coming to the centre, they want to enjoy the bigger games. That's absolutely spot on, but they don't have space. They don't want. It's not that they can't. They don't want to invest in huge amounts of figures and store them. They'd much rather. I mean, you've done some of this, right? When you go to put a game together at the club, the logistics of it is a headache. No matter what you do, it's a headache. You've got to get Dave down with his barbarians, and you've got to get Simon over with his Romans, and he's going to bring the light, the auxiliary, and we haven't got enough legion. What's going on? Where's Brian? Come on, get, and you've got to get everybody together, get all the figures together, and then you've got to have something to play on. So it takes all the setting up, and invariably there's 2 or 3 lads in the club that do all that. And everybody else turns up. So
and you can always guarantee that one bloke with some really, really essential bit of kit doesn't turn up. It's like, I've set this massive Pegasus bridge game up, right? I've got this massive table. Where's Dave with the bridge? He's like, what do you mean he's not coming? What do you mean he's not coming?
Get them rubber dinghies out. It's a river crossing now.
That would be bending history a bit.
Oh yeah, true enough. Yeah, back to 1940. Let's call it the MERS.
Yeah.
But if if these guys want to get into big games, they can. I guess some of the things that daunt them is they don't want to get in there and meet new people, and there's a little bit of hesitation on that. I'm here to tell you that without exception, nobody's come to my centre and thought, oh my God, they feel isolated and they're not getting involved with anything going on, because that's part of my nature. I'm very much the people pleaser, and I like to get people together. And I spend a lot of time working on the scenarios to make sure that people have a good time. I like to think so, anyway.
When the games are going on, then Mark, what's your role? Are you like a roving umpire?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm there 24/7, as it were, or throughout the whole game, anyway.
Yeah.
And if there's any questions, I answer them straight away. If there's any discrepancies, I am unbiased about it. That's very clear and very important, that you've just got to be unbiased. Yeah. And very rare do we get anybody arguing about stuff. It just doesn't really happen. Which I'm pleased about. I'm pleased about.
If you ban round dice, you will never have an argument. Because well, that's been an absolutely fantastic chat, Mark. I've really enjoyed this afternoon.
I'm delighted to meet you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming on. I always give people an opportunity to ask me a question at the end. Can you think Wargames related? I'm not giving you my PIN number for my bank card, right, like that. Can you think of a question for me?
How many Renaissance figures do you actually own?
28 mil.
Yeah. Oh God, no! Hang on, I didn't know there was a choice of range sizes.
No, I'm probably up pushing towards. Do you mean Italian Wars or Italian Wars and English Civil War? Because they're both Renaissance.
Don't split it out. Come on, be honest.
We're probably both collections together. We're up about 1,500-1,600, I would think. And the Italian Wars is getting a big drive on it at the moment. That's my current massive project, because somebody's taught me into writing a book about wargaming the Italian Wars. So I need some units, and I'm doing like chapters on building pipe blocks and stuff like that as well for people. So unfortunately, I've got to build another pipe block.
Good lad. I was going to say, like your school report, Ken, must try harder.
Yeah, must get more figures.
Yeah, more figures, more painting.
This month has been. I do a monthly update on the YouTube of what's going on here, and I can't believe the amount of stuff I bought this month. I got in conversation with a guy on Twitter, and I was after some T64 tanks. He says, I've got some of them, Ken. I said, oh, brilliant. How much do you want for them? Oh, great, I'll have them. He says, I've got some World War II tanks as well, if you're interested. I went, oh, well, I've put it to one side. And then he just showed me this box, and it was like huge. You could have got a real chieftain tank in it. And I said, what's in there? And he's given me this long list, and I'm doing Kursk, and there was 2 or 3 things I didn't want. And I said, all right, go on then, how much? And he told me, and I went, I bit his hand off. You can never have too many figures, is what I say.
No, exactly. Well, look, before you go, I'll invite you down to the Italian Wars weekend we have next year.
That would be
you come down as my guest, Ken.
That would be fantastic.
You can talk about it afterwards on your podcast.
If you want me to bring all my figures down, I'd be more than grateful.
Yeah, you do that, mate. You do that. I'd be delighted to see them. And you can pick out those Napoleonics you painted, so I can hold them in reverence.
I can sign the bottom of the bases, and they'll be worth more money then.
Oh, good lad, yeah.
Put a little picture of some mushy peas or something on the bottom of them, and then you'll know the mine. Right. On that note, everyone, thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Good night.
Good night, Ken. Thank you.
there we go, everyone. That was a lovely chat with Mark. I really enjoyed that, and I hope some of the humour and love for the big game came through in that interview. It was most enjoyable doing. So that's the end of the first run of 5 episodes, and I set out some a couple of months ago with a drunken tweet complaining about there not being enough coverage of big games on podcasts, and waking up in the morning with 175 likes and a load of people going, it'd be a great idea if you did one, Ken. So we're here now, and we've done our first 5, and I hope you've enjoyed them very much. I'd like to thank all my guests, Gareth Lane, Chris Breeze on the first episode, Richard Harris, Dr. Chris Brown, Colin Ashton, and of course Mark, for taking a leap of faith with me in this podcast. Of all those people, Chris has been the interviewer on podcasts, but not been the interviewee. And there's only Mark of all those people who had done a podcast before. And it was one of the things that I set out to do with these podcasts, was to bring some new voices to air and to talk about big games that they had played, and try and get some love and some attention to big game gaming in war games, and hopefully I've done that, and I'm going to try and continue that over the coming weeks and months as this podcast continues. I've decided to try and keep to a schedule of one every 3 weeks. I've looked at doing one every 2 weeks, and it is possible, and I've found having done one every 2 weeks with this first run of 5, it's perfectly doable. There's plenty of time to fit things in between and do all the editing and contacting of people and organising, etc. However, I did find that there was little break in between, and one thing I don't want to do is to kind of burn myself out with these podcasts and run out of guests and run out of ideas, and by having them 3 weeks in between each one, I'm finding myself yearning to do more rather than thinking, oh my god, I've got another one to do. So that's the plan, one every 3 weeks, and so that will mean that the next episode 6 of the new Yorkshire Gamers Reet Big Wargames podcast, will be on the 14th of May 2021. And I'm hoping to speak to Fraser von Ketteringham of YouTube fame. He's got a massive following on YouTube as the lad, and as well as all the other stuff that we're going to be talking about, the lad has built a big shed in his back garden for wargaming, a dedicated wargaming shed, and who doesn't want one of those at the end of the day? So we'll be speaking to Fraser about that hopefully in the next episode, which I'm very much looking forward to our chat. I'm going to keep the format roughly the same. I'm going to stick to the 4 sections that we currently have. The intro with the 4-minute bit of a giggle history of your entry into wargaming, and then a few questions around that. Our chat on big games and people's experience of them, and the joy of them, and what people would like to see, or the difficulties that people have with having big games. That's going to be part 2 again, and then the old Yorkshire Gamer Quiz. I've stuck to the same 20 questions for the first 5 episodes. I'm going to mix and match a few questions, come up with some more, and just to make it a little bit more interesting. But the quiz is staying, whether you like it or not. It does always seem to have a bit of a laugh, so I'm keeping that in. And then we'll follow with the big topic, and I'm going to try and pick each guest for some aspect of big gaming, whether that be rule writing, or, as we've had on a couple of the episodes, holiday centres, or organising big games, or organising big projects. I've got lots of ideas going forward for people to speak to, and I've also got a couple of ideas around kind of round table discussions and a couple of things. A few people have mentioned how Wargaming has helped them with mental health, and I think that would be a really good round table discussion if I could get 3 or 4 people involved in that in an episode. I think that would be really good. So, thank you very much for following me over these 5 episodes, and if you've not already, subscribe to us on Podbean or Apple Podcasts or any one of the podcast hosts. You should be able to find me by searching for Yarkshire Gamer with an A. There's only me out there with that title. So once again, Sithy.